Hey everybody, in today's video I wanted to outline for you a Sapphire Emerald build that I threw together, of course utilizing the new PAWPSICLE engine, but with all the hype behind Ruby Sapphire, I thought, well, what if we just tried a different color combination and see how it worked? I was really intrigued by the fact that blue had their own Hans in Prince Charming, and so we'll take a look at the deck list in a bit. It's around the 6-minute mark if you want to skip over to that. But in this matchup here, we're going up against a Ruby Amethyst deck actually, as you can see there, which still has some teeth in the format, but you'll see why the PAWPSICLE engine is just far and away just the better engine to be running nowadays, because you just generate so much card draw off of it. The focus of this build though is basically a high 5 kind of build where you're maxing out on your character drops at around 5 ink, and your 5 drop package is essentially like the new Belle Hidden Archer, Kuzco, the Temperamental Emperor from set 1, and I've opted to use Ray, the evasive one, because they're all pretty decent threats, all with decent effects. Like if you get Belle out on turn 4, which is what you see me do here, because I ramped up with Mickey, or if I'm able to ramp up with Fishbone Quill, it can be very tough to deal with, especially if the opponent is not playing Ruby. They need some form of non-challenging removal, otherwise they're losing their whole hand. And so you can see how that can easily counter an opposing player's PAWPSICLE engine if they don't have removal. And with the Ruby Sapphire deck that I've been playing, and I've seen other people have been playing and I've played against on the ladder, those decks are a little slower to get started, right? They play Teeth and Ambitions and things like that, things that don't really directly deal with the Belle. And so they're likely going to have to wait until later on, most likely turns 5, 6, 7 if they were able to ramp, or literally 6 or 7 until they get to the Lady Tremaine, assuming Belle is the only thing on your field, or just get to the Be Prepared number of 7 ink in order to clear your Belle without challenging it, because they don't play Dragonfire, right? This build actually did play Dragonfire. They actually discarded it off my Flynn Rider, and as you can see here, I knew they were obviously threatening Aladdin, right? Why else would you play the small Aladdin? And they still do not deal with my Belle. They do not want to discard their whole hand, and so Belle is just still free reign at this point, questing for as much as she wants. Now, if you were paying attention, you would have noticed my opponent missed one of their ink drops, and they likely did that on purpose or just forgot, but they probably did it on purpose because they have a lot of threats in hand that they want to keep and they don't want to ink, or they just have a bunch of uninkables. So with that in mind, I have to play around obviously a Be Prepared that I know will be coming, so I don't want to go too wide, and I opt to make a really odd play there where I use the Belle to take out the Queen, because I didn't want the Queen to crash into Hiram and then Aladdin take it out. I wanted to try to get an extra quest off with the Hiram to banish this PAWPSICLE and draw another 2 cards. I did risk my opponent having another rush character in hand, but seeing them ink their Mauis early on led me to believe, and I think they already used 1 Queen anyways, they probably don't have another rush character, and so questing with the Belle instead of challenging there may not have made the biggest difference, because they would have just clawed back the lore I got with the Belle anyways. But you can see just how much of a threat the Belle is. Now obviously I know the opponent's on 6 ink, they're going to get to 7 next turn, so I played 2 cards that replace themselves. In hindsight, I probably should have played the Eye of Fates and then quested, and then just only played the Mickey, because the Belle is such a big threat on field that it's going to warrant to Be Prepared anyways, whether or not I went wider or not on my board. So the opponent gets a little bit of extra value here by taking out my second Nick, which does quest for 2, which is also kind of crazy, but you can just see the advantage. We're at 11 lore, we have more ink, we have more cards in hand, we have, again, more lore than the opponent, right? And now it's our turn. After they're Be Prepared, we're able to play. It's absolutely insane. And what's nice about this deck, and a little bit of a misplay by me, I should have dropped the Enchantress there, because and I will go over this in the deck list video, in the deck list portion of the video. When you drop your ward character, in order to play around the Lady Tremaine, you actually want to drop it with a 2 costing character, so that they can't Lady Tremaine your Kuzco or whatever warded character you use. Now in this build, I'm not using a lot of warded characters, and I think I might switch over to that to test. So an example is I'm using like Kuzco, Ray, which is evasive and doesn't have ward, and Belle, which is, pretty good with the effect goes off, but doesn't have ward either. You could opt to switch those, the Ray and the Belle, for a Cogsworth, which is a 5-drop inkable that quests for 2 but has ward, as well as Pete, which quests for 2. Again, you don't play actions in this deck really, you'll see it in the deck list, but that's also a very strong option to pair with the Eye of Fates because it has ward. And so the only thing that can deal with that is Lady Tremaine or Be Prepared, right? So you're forcing out your opponent's big sweepers, and then you can just keep dropping your other threats, and everything is a threat in this deck with the Eye of Fates on board, right? And you can see the opponent is basically in spot removal mode here. If they can't keep up with the removal, we're just going to win the game. So I put 2 3-questers on board combined with the 2 Eye of Fate on the field. That's game if either one of these is able to quest. The opponent needs to have either a Be Prepared or an Elsa. They do have the Elsa. That's totally fine. And this is where it becomes a bit of a race, which is weird to say, right? But can they put enough threats on board that obviously I can't challenge and deal with? I mean, maybe I could with the Scepter, but probably not, before I can just kind of quest for game. And now I dropped the 2-drop Noi, I think is her name. And I have 3 Eye of Fates, and this is also game because my 2 quests are now quest for 5, which is insane. So they absolutely need to be prepared here, or take out both of, well, they can't take out my Ray with challenging, so even a Lady Tremaine here won't work. They need some way to forcibly remove my Noi with ward, and I think the only thing is a Be Prepared. And sure enough, the opponent does have their 3rd Be Prepared. So you can see how this deck was able to play through all of the removal the opponent has and still threaten game. Now in this instance, I, obviously should have been like, well, you don't have a 4th Be Prepared, and I should have dropped the Bell in case they have another Elsa. But again, a Maleficent here doesn't do enough, and sure enough, they have that because the Enchantress will get triple Eye of the Fated and quest for 5, and that's game. And so I just throw the opponent the sauce and then use the Eye of Fates to win the game. So let's go ahead and take a look at the deck list now. So this is the deck list, pretty cut and dry, pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and that's what I like to see. You will notice right away if you look to the bottom that it is 48 inkable cards, which means you will likely never brick and you will always have something to play each turn. With the Harem engine and the PAWPSICLE engine online, you will be replenishing your hand quite healthily with those 14 items as well, all of which are relevant as you saw in that match because you don't play any other forms of removal. The Scepter in this build also has some good utility in helping to beef up your characters in order to challenge if you need to, but most likely you won't because you'll be the one aggroing your opponent, forcing them to challenge your cards while you keep your hand nice and healthy with the PAWPSICLE engine to keep replacing your threats. So in total you have 12 2-drops, like I mentioned, good to play early game, but also good post Be Prepared when you probably have 7 or 8 ink, so that you can drop one of your high 5 characters, ideally with ward. Like the Cusco is the only one I play in this instance, but like I said earlier, you can play Pete and or Cogsworth as well. But you drop that 5-drop warded character with another 2-drop character to protect it from the Lady Tremaine play. And the builds of Ruby Sapphire that I've been seeing have actually been cutting back on the Lady Tremaines because the uninkable count is just too high. It is a very good card, but it does have its weaknesses, and this is one of the ways, like I said in my other video where I outlined my Ruby Sapphire build, that people will start playing around Lady Tremaine. This is one of the ways I think you can do it. Moving on to our 3-drop package, you have the Cheshire Cat and the Mickey. Cheshire Cat doesn't really have too much value here, so you might want to look at maybe something better. I just threw it in there for now to carve out the 3 curve. But everything so far quests for 2 except for the Mickey, which is pretty strong. Then on your 4-drop, if you don't see a Mickey or a Fishbone Quill to skip ahead a turn on ink so that you can drop your 5-drop on turn 4, you have a pretty healthy 4-drop package as well. You've got 6 Princes that quest for 3, you've got the Hiram, and you have the Nick Wild. And if you drop PAWPSICLE turn 1, you can likely recycle that with the Nick, so that's always good, but Nick also quests for 2, which is pretty strong. So right away you can see, playing on curve, you are putting a lot of pressure on your opponent, and if you do get your items up, the Noi, Orphan Thief, actually deals with aggro really well because it can challenge all those 1/1 high questing characters like the Maleficents, the Lilos, the Pinocchios, and just take them out, especially like I said with the item up and it has resist 1 and ward, so your opponent can't target it. It's pretty good to help stave off that aggro build, but you will suffer a little bit against those aggro builds because they're just more aggro than you and you're trying to be aggro in their face as well. But again, the nice thing is if you do carve out your curve, your Princes being a 3/3 body also help deal with a lot of what those aggro threats are able to throw at you. In addition, the Bell just puts a ton of pressure on your opponent and it demands an answer usually, especially once you get it going with the Eye of the Fates. In a mid-range kind of matchup, you ideally would have the advantage, even if you don't go first and have the tempo control, because you're able to ramp up on ink, hopefully, to make clawback that advantage. And then the extra card draw just replaces, replaces your extra ink that you generate with the PAWPSICLE engine. And what you lose with Fishbone Quill or something like that, you again just replenish. So going to the end package here, like I mentioned, 12 of your kind of finishers. The Ray is really good, but again, not having ward makes it an easy target for things like Maleficent, Hades, Dragonfire, and or if you don't pair it with something, it can be outed by the Lady Tremaine. So Pete might be another option. Even though you don't play actions to boost up the Pete strength or any support characters, the Eye of Fates with Pete is pretty strong, and Pete is a 3/4 body on its own, so it's decently healthy at 4 willpower. It can survive a couple of things as well. And like I said, the Bell, especially if you get it out early, it's just such a huge threat. No one's really been using this in any meta decks really, so I'm trying to use some of these new cards that were hyped up in the beginning and see how good they are. And I've already explained the item package. So that is the deck. There are of course more things that you can do and change around, but a pretty nice consistent list overall. Let's go ahead and take a look at one other match before we wrap up this video. So this was a nice quick match here, and once again you're seeing the benefit of playing so many inkable cards. Our whole hand can be ink, and we have a nice choice of whatever we want to play based on what the opponent was doing. And this opponent here was using Amber Sapphire. I think they were using the Rampunzel deck that ended up winning that Apex Gaming tournament. But with the Flynn Rider on field, they're going to try to dump their hand pretty quickly in order to deal with this Flynn Rider. And, you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing. They've got the Fishbone Quills. They're going to get extra ink. They're going to keep up with my ink ability potentially. And they did go first, so this is another going second match where we are technically behind on tempo, but we have bigger threats than they do, and they're really reliant upon that Bell closing the game out for them. So this just goes to show you how much the game has evolved since the first chapter, because these decks need to really adapt to kind of the PAWPSICLE draw engine, which is what you're going to see me start utilizing here. Just once you get the Hiram online, it's absolutely crazy. Sacrifice the Fishbone Quill, and yeah, let's just start popping off from here, right? So we have way more card advantage, we have a board presence, and the opponent finally drops their Bell. They inked one earlier, but they just can't keep up at this point, right? And with all of the emerald threats that we play too, as soon as we start dropping those emerald threats, and right now we only have a Ray, there's no way for them to deal with it essentially, right? They have to top deck like a Hades, like, you know, if they top deck Surfer Stitch, that uses up all their ink for the turn. Like, there's nothing really that they can do in this situation that's going to get them back into the game. So as sad as it is, I think the game is over basically by turn 5, turn 6, even though it's only 4 to 7 on the lore count. They throw both their bodies into the Hiram, and I guess because they drew a Rapunzel, and obviously they didn't want to throw it into the Flynn Rider to discard the Rapunzel. So, you know, just Rapunzel, such a powerful card in set 1. You can see how limited the utility can be now, because the card draw is just not what it used to be. In set 1 it was really good, but I mean Rapunzel is still demanding a pretty penny out on the market. But hey, I'm fine with my PAWPSICLE engine, I'll tell you. At this point though, like I said, the game's pretty much over, so we're gonna drop the Prince and Mickey. Or no, we dropped the Noi Orphan Thief, and at this point we have game on board, and the opponent's going to go ahead and scoop it up. So yeah, you can just see how effective the deck can be. Anyways, if you made it this far in the video, let me know what you think. Thank you for watching. Quantum is out.